I'm your host, Chelsea Myers, and today I am really excited. It's taken a little bit of scheduling. I think I've said that on just about every episode this week, but it's the summer, and so it's taken a bit of scheduling and finagling of things, and I am very excited to have made something work today with Marni Blythe. Marni, welcome to the show.
Hi, Chelsea. Thank you so much. And hello, everybody. I'm so glad we can make this work.
Oh, I'm so excited for this. So, Marni, I don't even remember exactly how you and I first connected, but it was one connection point after another. And I just knew this was going to be a really fun conversation because we just have so much that's aligned. It might actually be easier to find the things that we differ on a little bit. So, welcome to the show. And if you would just start out and give us a little bit of background. Who are you? What are you doing? Tell us those kinds of things.
Marni Blythe, my company's called Full Pocket Coaching, and I am a fractional integrator and CMO, and we provide fractional interim executive services for emerging DSOs. So you have a DSO, 8 to 15 practices, and you're finding you're having a leadership gap. We can come in and provide that executive interim leadership to really help fill the gap so you have more efficiency, more productivity, and really to be in position to go acquire more, but making sure you're doing it with responsible growth. And then I also love to do that for independent dental practices as well.
Ooh, okay. And this is why I am so excited to highlight you today on the show because there are lots of companies that do this. But here's what I know about Marni. What I would love for our audience to know is there are some things that she really gets about leadership and about the human component of leading our dental businesses. Marni, what is your leadership philosophy?
Wow, my leadership philosophy. I think humility, doing your own work really is probably some of the most important pieces of this. So I think when you're a leader, you have to realize that you have to continually be working on your personal growth plan and owning your own stuff, right? Because if we're not doing our own work as leaders, then we cannot hold the space. We cannot expect our teams to go where we have not gone. And sometimes that can be really hard and really challenging. I know in my own world, sometimes there's just ebbs and flows and lots of wonderful teachers along the way and lessons to be learned. And I think that we have to continually be on a path of growth for our own self so that we can hold that space for our teams.
Yeah, and that shines through in just about everything you say and do because, it could be a bit unsettling to think about bringing in someone temporarily or fractionally to take care of something that's so near and dear to our hearts. But what I love about you is you make it just really well known that you're not just going to come in with the systems and operations, which is really, really important, but there's a lot of people that can do that. You're going to come in and really care for the living, breathing organization that is existing and that we're trying to grow. And that is unique and that sets you apart. And you're going to do that with a heavy dose of love and humility and awareness of not just the logistical pieces that need to be put in place, but the people that you're asking to implement those systems and operations.
Well, gosh, you speaking to my heart, Chelsea. I mean, it takes one to know one. I know the work that you're doing in the world is so closely aligned with that. And what I say to all of my clients and my friends is that when we come in and the people that we have on our team, I might as well be the CEO or be the owner or operator because of the level of care and concern. And that is the integrity of who I am. And integrity is my number one personal core value, and it's the number one personal core value of my company. And so we do what we say we're going to do. And if we can't do it, we say why we can't do it. And having transparent communication and creating psychological safety in your DSO, in your practice, is the birthplace of where true growth comes from. And when we're able to do that as leaders and we're able to empower those around us and create an environment where we can talk about our issues, specifically, and do so feeling like we want to be heard, then that's where the magic happens, right? That's where those connections happen. That's the underpinning of everything, right? And I know you know that, Chelsea. I know you know that so well.
No, you're so right. I mean, healthcare and dentistry, it's an industry we are prone to error and growing pains. And when there isn't that level of safety and trust amongst our teams and team members, it's impossible to create those advances because people like to stay where we're safe. We either want to feel better or at least not worse, right? And so if I'm already good at my job and doing something I know how to do, I'm not going to take additional risks if that comes with the added bonus of being scrutinized or ostracized from the group or being made to feel like I'm not good enough and I don't measure up here. We all want to be a part of something that's moving and growing and that we feel better having been a part of, and that we feel like we're contributing to that forward movement. And that psychological safety is just such a huge component that has to be there. Otherwise, you can never advance the way that other organizations are going to pass you up in advance. So let's say I've self-identified in the beginning of this conversation. I've got 10 practices. What are some things that are going to be glaring red flags that let me know, while I may not be ready to hire a permanent position, I could really use a service like yours?
So I'm just making sure I understand the question. What are the flags that say it's time to bring in somebody?
Fractionally, yeah, because I may
Yeah,
not understand what exactly that means. How long does that last? What am I
right.
looking
Yeah,
for?
good questions. Yeah. So I would say the first flag, right? Like, so if you are a CEO, you are in a leadership position at that emerging DSO, or you're an independent dentist. If you're feeling overwhelmed, one, and two, you're feeling like you're not really quite sure what the path forward is, and you're in that weird space where you know you need help, but you may not be able to afford that full C-suite or those leadership teams, at a full time. You might not be able to afford it, and or you might not need the full time, right? Like, there's a lot of smaller DSOs or dental offices who could really benefit from that kind of leadership. However, you don't need 40 hours a week. Maybe you need 15 or 20 hours from a fractional COO, or from a fractional HR, or a fractional HR person, or from a fractional hygienist, or a fractional integrator like myself. So I think the first step to knowing that you need some help is if you're feeling overwhelmed, right? And then the second step would be to call somebody like myself, or there's a lot of great fractional integrators and fractional COOs out there, depending upon who's the right fit, because not everybody's the right fit for each other, and a lot of great talent in our industry. And then having a conversation. And then what we do is we come in and we evaluate first and foremost. We're going to see what's already in place. And then we're going to create a bespoke solution. And that could be, for like one of my emerging DSOs, we've been in there for 4 months. And we are at a place now where, we've had conversations and it's time to gracefully pass the baton. This particular DSO is ready to bring in a new VP, and that is a really great thing because we've done our job. And so I think that there's the grace of making sure that's a seamless transition, because it's like, again, yeah, it can be scary to bring in an interim team. Like, what happens when it's time to make that transition? But again, transparent communication, constantly talking through where have we been, where are we now, where are we going, and making sure that there's that execution on the vision, right? So that's the beauty of when you have a visionary and then you have the integrator, that beautiful VI relationship. If you want to know more about that, anybody who's listening, Rocket Fuel by Gino Wickman is a great, great book to help understand how the visionary and integrator work together. And the word integrator has been used a lot right now in dentistry. It's starting to have more pull, but a lot of times people don't really know what that means. And essentially, there's been these great VI relationships throughout history. I mean, you look at like Walt Disney, I can't remember his integrator's name, but there's been so many. I think it was his brother, actually. There's so many times. So visionaries are the kind of people you might, if you're listening, you'll know this is you. You've got 15,000 ideas. They keep coming up every few minutes, right? It's like you wake up in the night with a great idea. But then you're not the one who wants to actually execute on it. You're not the one who's bringing it to the ground and worrying about the details and how it actually gets done. And that's what integrators usually do, whether that's implementing a new software, or that's, making sure just across the organization and all of your, so operations, marketing, yeah, finance, HR, that's really happening. So does that answer that question?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm definitely self-identified as the visionary. And you're right, it was Walt Disney's brother. So I think that's why I like you so much, Marni. I'm like, oh man, what do I do next? Let me just go read one of her posts and she can get me back on the right track. Actually, I have a fantastic integrator that I also happen to be married to, and that's been very useful for me because but you're right, and everyone listening here, if you're leading a dental business or you're a practice owner, you are that visionary and you understand the incredible dichotomy that can exist when you are really good at what you do and not really good at all the other things. And so I think for me, at least, there's been two parts to that. There's been the things that I know I'm not good at that I need to figure out and find those experts and those resources. And then there's the things I just don't even know that I don't know until I sit down with someone like you that says, hey, Kay, just bird's eye view here. Here's kind of the roadmap to get there. And I'm going, whoa, I'm getting chills just like hearing that, because those aren't on my radar when I'm dreaming up the vision. I've got like end goal in mind,
Oh, I get it. And Chelsea, you're doing such incredible work in the world. And, the world would be a very boring place if we all had the same strengths. And, as you were chatting, I was thinking about when I'd done strength finders with Gallup. I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity. There's a lot of these different assessments. My friend Sarah Ruberg just posted about DISC assessment and things like that. But I remember, so last year in October, I was over at Ann Duffy's event, DO, Dental Entrepreneur Women, and I hope you'll be there, Chelsea, in October. Plug for the DO event, because I'm really excited about that. I was actually just talking to one of my team members, Victoria, and I was like, you have to come be there. But we did one of the Strength Finders evaluations, and I think one of the biggest things that I've learned through Strength Finders is that it's about knowing what you're good at and not worrying about you learning personally how to do better on what you're not good at. It's about finding those experts. And it sounds to me, Chelsea, like you're doing a really masterful job of identifying those areas and then bringing in those people to help you. Another example, actually, I think about, so I actually created an 8,000 square foot holistic health and fitness center with my former spouse that we had for 6.5 years. And I built it from the ground up. And I say that was my MBA. I joke about that. And I'll never forget in the beginning days, because I wore all the hats, right? Like when we are sitting in that visionary seat, often we're an entrepreneur, we're wearing all the hats. And I was the CMO, I was the COO, I was the CFO. And man, I will tell you, trying to track accounts receivable, accounts payable, all that kind of stuff, I got very overwhelmed. And so I said, I'm bringing in a fractional CFO, one of the best decisions I could have ever made, because then I was able to really stay in my lane of where all of my gifts were and continue to just put rocket fuel behind that, and then have people behind me, like who could support all the other things where I had those challenges. So it's the really smart person, in my opinion, like you, Chelsea, who can identify where we have strength and then fill in the gaps with the other people who are expert at what they do in those areas.
Absolutely. And I think we like to hang out where we're confident. And so we spend a lot of time focusing on those things and tackling those projects. And it's not a lot of fun to first identify and then own up to the areas that we don't know. And I think that there can be some real unnecessary shame and procrastination in getting those resources in place when we recognize that there's some part of our system that just isn't working or flowing the way that we want and need it to in order to continue our growth. However, with a healthy dose of encouragement and just courage in general, we can really make those advances rather quickly once we're able to do that. And so I just think those preliminary conversations, those informational interviews with people like you can just be so unveiling of what's working, what's not, and what could be put in place. And the example that you gave, in a relatively quick period of time, sometimes it's just a matter of a few months, you're able to get yourself to an entirely new position. So you've mentioned your team a little bit. If somebody here is listening and they're like, okay, maybe I want to work with Marni, talk to me about your team. What types of services do you guys offer?
Yeah, thank you so much. So we are always looking for we're always looking for fractional executives, who've got experience in dental. So if you are a former COO or HR person, if you have CFO experience, really, I mean, marketing, really across all the disciplines, it's always something we're looking for. Because again, depending upon who the culture and the fit of that particular emerging DSO or that practice, we're going to utilize different people. So I think some of the most important things to ask yourself if you would be interested in working with our team would be, are you a core values match? And the core values of my company include integrity, compassion, empathy, grow or die, and vulnerability. And so that to me is the first way in which I hire. I learned a couple of years ago, and I started really coaching on hiring people first on core values and then on experience. And I wish I'd known that a long time ago when I had my holistic health and fitness center, because I used to hire, oh, this feels like a good person, and they look like they have good experience, and then they'd get in, and a week later I'd be like, oh gosh, why did I hire that person? They're not showing up on time, and certain things like that. So core values is kind of everything to me. And I only want to work with clients, and I only want to work with team members who share the same core values that we have.
And that is just such a fantastic direction for this conversation right now, because everybody listening, regardless of where you're sitting in that organization, you've got a team around you. And I think it's such an important question to ask yourself on a regular basis. Would I rehire this person? For two reasons. For the person, we want to take care of our people and make sure we've got the right people around us. And also for ourselves, we need to be really clear on what it is we're building. I know in the work that I do, we go into detail about what our values are, and it can be really enlightening to first identify up front what you think your values are, and then really do some detective work and figure out, what decisions am I making? How am I spending my time? How am I spending my money? And see if those decisions align with the values that are most important to us. What type of work do you do with your clients to help discover that value set so that we can make smarter hires?
Yeah, great question. So when we begin work, one of the first things we do is we make sure that we reset the foundation, and we evaluate or reevaluate the foundation, right? So that includes, what is your mission? What are your core values? What's your unique selling proposition? Those are some of the really foundational things that we start to answer. And then we also build what we call an accountability chart, which is different than an org chart. An org chart tells the outside world, what your title is, but an accountability chart talks about what are the 5 most important roles. And then the other part of it is, where are we trying to go financially? So with the core values specifically, we're going to tease out what are really the 5 most important core values. And then that becomes a living, breathing exercise, right? It's not just something that we do one time and then it, gathers dust sitting, on a bookshelf somewhere. It's about, making, how do we hire? How do we fire? How do we reward? How do we make sure that we are really living those core values? And then that's how patients, we attract the right patients. Everything comes from that, right? And so, and then I love how we do quarterly meetings in which I love to quiz our teams and ask them what the core values are and give out prizes and stuff, because the more that they know it and they start to really imbibe that, then they start to make decisions based upon those core values as well. And when you're able to really, from the top down, start to really empower, and as goes the leadership team, goes the rest of your organization. So you've got to make sure on your leadership team that you have the right people in the right seats who also share your core values. Because if your leadership team is not all aligned, then the rest of your organization certainly will not be. And that, whether you have a 5-person practice, a 15-person practice, you are the CEO and you own 500 DSOs, you have 500 DSOs, it's still the same philosophy, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I know that you mentioned earlier on in the show that some of your clients are solo practice owners. And so talk to me a little bit about the services for that individual, because maybe they don't have the desire to, or are you saying that's not your client? But if, let's say I don't have the desire to grow multiple practices, but I want this one really, really healthy, what would that type of relationship look like?
So it's very, very similar. The difference is that when I work with an independent practice, it's usually just me. And
Okay.
then I'm working as that integrator, and then I'm helping really align them. And so the real difference is simply whether we have a whole team of people or not, right? Like, so we're very nimble and we're really good at pivoting, and we have a lot of flexibility, which, my goodness, in the last couple of years, I think all of us have learned a lot about the importance of learning how to pivot and, being flexible to what's showing up. So yeah, when I work with my independent dental practices, we work very similarly, except it's just on a smaller, it's just on a smaller scale than it would be, if we were working, with the leadership team of a DSO.
Yeah, I love that you say pivot. When I first started coaching in dental, I began professional coaching at Wells Fargo Bank and then moved to public education while getting my feet wet in dental. And even after I'd partnered in some practices, because of that non-traditional background, I didn't start out in this industry. It was received with a little bit of skepticism or resistance at first. And then when you talk about over the last few years, everybody pivoting, it is now almost celebrated, like, oh, you have experience outside of dental. This is fantastic, because I think that we're realizing as an industry that the variety of experiences and the differing perspectives is what makes us richer and fuller and more well equipped for an ever-changing world and industry that we're living in. I mean, look at the consolidation, right? It's so rapid. You can hardly keep your head on straight. But let's say, going back to that solo practice owner, I did have one other question that came to mind when you were talking. And let's say that I'm not even ready yet. My accountant said, hey, you don't have room to hire a consultant, even somebody on a fractional basis. What can I be doing to get myself ready? Because I know I'm going to want to grow in a way that will require additional resources.
Yeah, that's a super great question. So I would say that the DIY version would be to start with a 2-hour meeting of your leadership team and work on teasing out what are your own core values. What is your mission? And your mission is really comprised of what you do and why you do it. And it goes beyond money. It's, what is the passion, right? What's the passion behind it? And then it's doing your own accountability chart, and looking at who's in what positions and are the right people in the right seats, right? Are your assistants the right people? Are they working with the right associates, or is there alignment there? Or are those personalities different? One of my independent practices, we recently started doing pods. So we've paired, like, so one of my dentists, he's all about writing, and he's all about reading, and he was working with an assistant who that was not her forte and so much. So, but then the other associate, that worked really well for him instead. So now they're kind of teamed up in these pods, right? So we've made sure there's alignment, not only from a clinical perspective, but also from just a style and like what really works, right? So doing that. And then KPIs and creating a scorecard is everything. And that's really about figuring out in your particular practice, what are the 5 drivers, right? 5 to 7 most important drivers for growth. And where are you trying to go, right? Like that's the biggest thing is if you don't know where you're going, then all roads lead to nowhere. So it's about right? Like we got to say, hey, here's the goal. And that can be a financially driven goal, but there's other goals as well, right? So one of the things actually, I just did what's it called? A demo of a new software that's out there. It's called Different Kind. Are you familiar with that yet,
I
Chelsea?
am. Yes.
Yeah. And I am like so excited about that because you want to talk about other KPIs where, understanding what's the empathy level of the practice and what is that patient experience really like, right? So I am so excited that in dentistry that we're starting to hear about other driving factors that go beyond just RCM and what's the latest AI. And I don't mean to sound it's not that I'm bashing that in any way, and those are very, very important components, but there's more to the story and having those emotional intelligence drivers and understanding that factor, that's how patients come back, right? Like that's huge. So scorecard is really important. Setting a weekly 90-minute meeting with your leadership team in which you have a specific agenda and you stick to that agenda, ensuring that you have a successful and productive meeting and that there's accountability assigned, who's responsible and who's accountable. And those are 2 different things at the end of the day, right? So accountable is ultimately who makes sure that the work is done, but you can assign different people who would be responsible for that. One of the things that I see that happens so often is that in meetings, we talk and talk and talk, but nobody says who's doing it and when is it due, and then making sure that when the due date comes that we say, was it done? Like that in and of itself, it seems so simple, but it's so hard for people to do, right? And then making sure you're having regularly scheduled meetings with your clinical team, with your administrative team, and then setting up quarterly meetings where you are communicating where we've been, where we are, and where we're going proactively to your teams. Because what happens when there's an information vacuum, people find things to pick at that might not be the things that you want them to be focused on. So by providing proactive, transparent information, you are empowering people to be able to make their own decisions and understand where the leadership and the vision is going in a very, very empowering way. So those are the things that I would suggest. And those are the things that we do and we assist with doing when you're not able to really do it yourself or you don't want to do it yourself.
That's so great. And luckily this is going to be on multiple platforms. So you can go back and just record that listen to that last part of the recording. It was really nice the way you tied a bow on all of that. And coming through it, I will say, is a high degree of organization, which in truth, some of us struggle with, especially in those early years of building a business. But unless you're living in some alternative universe where time and currency don't exist, we can't just have clinical schedules that we follow. Like Marni was saying, we've got to have a really high degree of organization around the projects that we're doing and the responsibilities that are being carried out and the follow-up. I love that you said that because it does no good if it's on a calendar if we don't follow up and make sure that it was completed. And that's a data point. Was it completed to accuracy and completion, or do we have additional work to do? And now what does that mean for us now that it's completed? So just so many good things that you put in there. And I love that you said it that way. Thank you. Marni, is there anything else as we're wrapping things up that you want to make sure our listeners hear from you today?
Oh my goodness. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to be here with you, Chelsea. And I love following you and your insightful posts and your contribution to all things in this industry. And I'm just excited about what the future holds. I think there's so much incredible work to be done for oral and systemic health. And we really hold the key to helping people. And that's really what all of this is about. At the end of the day, it's about, like you started it off talking about just loving people, and there's love and there's fear, and that's all there is at the end of the day. Which are you coming from in your organization? And unfortunately, so often we see people making decisions from fear and they don't even know it because they are not doing their own personal growth work. So that would be the final message that I would just leave people with is, it can be uncomfortable, but do the work and find a professional to help you to do that work so that you can really hold that space and be the best leader that you can be for all those who are counting on you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Marni. This has been just a pleasure. I always love connecting with you and talking with you. And I'm so glad that we got you on the show today. I know everybody loved it.
Oh, Chelsea, I can't tell you. Thank you so much. And before we go, we'll have to share some chats around our CrossFit because I know that you're a CrossFitter too. So we definitely need to connect on that. I love your new pictures.
Oh my gosh, thank you. So, here's the thing. I am taking a group of doctors through a weight loss journey that starts in a couple of weeks. And in advance, I was talking to my husband and I'm like, I don't actually want to go through the really rough couple of weeks on air. So let's start. I'm going to start early. And he's like, well, I think I'll do it with you this time, which has been so cool because I've got, a partner in crime and we're not eating flour. We're not eating sugar. We've got these really strict eating windows, very organized workout schedules, which, going back to what you were talking about, the organization in our offices, it is so synonymous with the organization in our life. I find that I find that you can't draw a line and be separated. Like I'm organized over here, but not over here. And so I find that when I put an emphasis on the way that I'm caring for my mind and my body, the success I experience in my business just seems to piggyback on that. And similarly, when I loosen the standard with how I'm taking care of myself, I'm loosening the standard subconsciously on other things that end up translating into the business. So I'm pretty consistent, and I'm a stickler about how I take care of myself. But anyways, so we've been at this for about a week and a half now. And do you know he's down? Yesterday he was down 6 pounds. I didn't ask him today before we started the show, but men just lose weight like rapid fire. And I'm like slowly trudging along. I think yesterday I was like 1.5 pounds, and I've worked out more. And so it's kind of that fun and funny competition. But tell me about you. What are your personal habits, and why do you have them, and what do you love?
Yeah, I'll be happy to. I will begin by saying that healthy weight loss is 1 to 2 pounds a week. So making sure that we have realistic expectations when we are trying to lose weight and take better care of ourselves.
Totally.
So one of the things is following 80/20. I have a very, very dear friend of mine, Dr. Aaliyah Gard. She and her husband own Gard Wellness Center. And she's a functional medicine doc and chiropractor, and she talks about the 80/20. So eating really super clean and healthy 80% of the time, and 20% of the time allowing yourself to indulge in that glass of wine or, whatever that is. But for me, so my journey, I've been doing CrossFit now, can't believe this, but since I think 2012, 2013.
Oh.
I did have to take off about 1.5 years because I had an injury. I'd been in a really bad car accident 10 years ago. And I didn't realize the impact that it had on my neck and shoulders and on my back. But I CrossFit usually 3 to 5 times a week, and I do it first thing in the morning. If it doesn't happen in the morning, it doesn't happen. And it really, there's so much analogy for me, like in terms of like what I do in the gym is so analogous to what I do in my career. And it's about mental toughness, and it's about mindset all the time, right? Whether you think you can or you can't is what happens, So like this morning, for example, was a tougher workout. There was 5 rounds. After the first round, I thought I was just going to pass out on the floor. I mean, it was really tough. And so the mind gives out before the body does. or rather, yeah, exactly. So my body was, or no, opposite, sorry. The body gives out before the mind does. So my body was going, oh my gosh, really? But I was like, okay, I can do this. Even if I need to slow down a little bit or I need to focus on breathing more. And I just was like, I'm just here to move and I'm giving myself grace because I've had some other tough stuff happen this week. And so every day is different, just like in our businesses. And I think giving ourselves grace is so impactful and important. So it's mind, body, and our spirit. Fueling my body with healthy food and making good health choices. And I'm not a drinker, never really been a drinker, but I find that alcohol is just, it's like poison for me. So I really don't drink. And that's not a judgment on anybody who does. I still have a drink every once in a blue moon. But making sure I get enough sleep, making sure that I'm eating well. And that way I can really show up fully in all aspects of my life. As a mom, I'm a single mama. I've got a beautiful 8-year-old little girl, and I got a fur baby, my little dog, and, my boyfriend and my friends and volunteering. It's a really full life. And I want to show up fully as best as I can for my personal best every day. So I think those are really impactful and important things that as long as we're taking good care of ourselves and being good stewards of our own mind, body, spirit, again, we will do that for other people as well.
That is so beautiful. And I love that you say it that way because, when people learn about the way that I eat or the way, the habits I am really, really consistent with, from time to time, whether it's a holiday or a birthday or a friend or family gathering, they'll be like, so are you going to have a cheat today? Are you going to celebrate? And I'm like, I really don't understand that methodology except to relate that if I had not experienced what I've experienced, I can see how that would be appealing. However, knowing the higher level of energy and the clarity of mind and the control over my emotional life that I'm able to have when I live my life this way, it is not celebrating to me to go put something like you described as poisonous in my body where I know I'm going to be lethargic or feel bloated or, not be able to execute or show up in the ways that I want to show up, because I have found the secret sauce, and that is, like you said, taking care of my mind, body, and spirit in tandem. I describe it sometimes like this, like if there were 3 prongs and a rubber band was wrapped around all 3 and only 2 of them were moving forward, let's say it's just your mind and your body, but your spirit, you weren't really taking care of, you weren't really acknowledging your emotions and caring for that piece of you. Eventually the rubber band snaps. You have to be taking care of all 3 aspects in order to experience that growth, which allows us to contribute to the people around us in the ways that we want to. And so I just think I'm glad that you brought that up and that we closed with that, because it can't be understated. The connection that the way that we take care of ourselves has to every other area of our lives.
I love that analogy that you just made. And I think that's a coming social media post for you. I think that would be really cool. It actually makes me think about, and I'll just close with this. So when I did my life coaching certification, one of the things that we had was the wheel of life. And I'm sure you probably do something like this with your clients, where it's like you have, it's like concentric circles that go out, and you start with 0 to 10, and you put all the categories of your life, and then you rate how good you're doing it good, like how aligned you are. And it's like, and then the wheel can be like this, right? It looks nothing like a wheel when you're done if you're not aligned in all those categories. So you see how bumpy the ride is when you're not taking care of different aspects of yourself, right? And so I love what you shared about it not being celebratory for you, and and it could be for somebody else, and that's okay. We're all at different places on the journey, right? And I know you do that. You're so great about doing that with your clients and those around you and holding space, and I think it's just honoring those around us and ourselves ultimately, isn't it? Right? Just having that grace and compassion and not going into resentment or trauma response, and if we do have some of those lower feelings, being able to identify that that's where we've gone and being able to shift that rather than staying in that mucky place. So anyway, I probably have said too much at this point. Time, but I just so much, Chelsea. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity and the platform. So
I know, me too. As you're talking, I'm going, oh, and we could go this route. We could just talk all day. We'll have to make this into a multi-part series. Yeah, we'll put together a webinar. So coming soon, Marni and I are going to put together a webinar series for all of you leaders who would like to learn more about how we think about things.
I think this might be the beginning of a beautiful new webinar series. We should offline about this.
Marni, thank you so much for being on today. It was really a pleasure, and we will definitely continue this conversation.
Okay, thank you so much.